Hey everyone, my name is Bogdan, and I'm a .NET developer working for Maxcode. I'm going to talk today about Blazor and how to use it to build native mobile apps. But before I get started, I want to introduce my background a little bit. So I started with Windows Phone back in 2012, I think. And after that, I went to Windows 8, Windows 10, which is now UWP, I think, the Universal Windows Platform. Also did some WPF, and of course I did other stuff as well, Node.js, a bit of Java, but in .NET it was, I think you see the pattern here, it was mostly XAML. I haven't really played with Razor, MVC or the syntax, mostly in personal projects. So my experience is mostly on the XAML side. But I'm curious to see what your opinions are today, because I see that 89% of the audience has done mostly web. So this is going to be interesting. Let's look at the agenda. Okay, we're going to start with an intro to mobile Blazor bindings. I'm going to explain a bit how it works. Then we're going to discuss about the XAML versus web approach. I'm curious which one you would prefer. And the demo will be mostly focused on creating a mobile app. Okay, so there are only a few slides. If you have questions, you can go to this website, Slido, and use the code Maxcode. Okay, and there you can ask questions. Other people can upvote your questions, and if they are relevant to what I'm talking now, I'll try to answer to them right in the middle of the presentation. Or if not, I'll try to answer all of them at the end of the presentation. Okay, now let's talk a bit about mobile Blazor bindings. Probably only a few of you have played with this technology. It's a new experimental project by Elan Lipton. I think he has over 17 years of experience in the ASP.NET team. And this project allows developers to create native mobile components using Blazor. Essentially, the bindings are wrappers around Xamarin Forms controls. Okay, and I know that Elon and a lot of people might think that this would appeal to web developers, but me with the XAML background, I find it more appealing because it's the structure I know from Xamarin Forms, and it's really easy to use it with Blazor. Okay, so you can follow Elon on Twitter. He's sharing most of the details there about the project. And I want you to understand that this is not something that will replace Xamarin Forms, for example. Okay, this is just another way to build native mobile apps on iOS and Android. I also tried Universal Windows Platform, and it worked. I don't know why this isn't mentioned in the documentation. Maybe they don't want to focus on it, but it also works, and I'm going to show this to you in the demo. And there's also Maui, for those of you who watched Build last week. Okay, it's the thing that will replace Xamarin Forms starting next year with .NET 6. I asked Elon if this means that Blazor will be there with mobile Blazor bindings, and he said that this would help shape support for Blazor. Okay, I don't know what to take from this answer. It's not really straightforward, but we at least have that. So I'm really hoping that this project will have a future in Maui. Okay, how it works. So I said that the bindings are essentially wrappers over Xamarin Forms elements. Okay, so this means that if you take a button in mobile Blazor bindings, it's actually a wrapper for the Xamarin Forms button. And this is a piece of code from the mobile Blazor bindings core project. If you already did Blazor, you recognize the parameter, the syntax. So essentially, you take the properties, callbacks from Xamarin Forms, and you expose them as Blazor bindings. And that it's also a wrapper for the Android button or for the iOS UI button. So in the end, you end up with native components. Okay, so you have speed because this is what you want, right? Another thing which I'm curious what you would prefer. So me, because I have a XAML background, I'm really comfortable with the syntax that mobile Blazor bindings has now. Okay, but some developers, especially those coming from the web, would want to use divs, paragraphs, and stuff like that with Blazor. Because this is what they have experience with. Just want to talk about requirements. You need .NET Core 3 or 3.1 and the following workloads from Visual Studio or Visual Studio for Mac, if you're on a Mac, of course. Also the Windows Platform Development one, if you want the UWP app. Okay. Now, I'm going to go to the interesting part and we are going to do the demo. Cool. So let's start with the new project, of course. I think that it's easier to understand what mobile Blazor bindings is about if you watch a simple demo, right? So I'm going to do just that. The first thing that you want to do is to install the template. Okay, I'm going to open the Windows terminal. Okay, so now the preview tree is available. So if you want to install the template, this is the command that you have to execute, but I already did that. So instead, I'm going to create a project called Smart Lights. This project is going to do something like this. Okay, so I want to see a list of my lights, okay, with a switch, the color of the lights and the name, and I want to control them from the app. The reason I chose this functionality is because you'll get to see bindings from how they work in mobile Blazor bindings and how to create custom components and so on. So I think that it will give me the chance to show you a lot of things. Okay, so the project is created. I created it from the command line because you don't have an option for it in Visual Studio so far. Okay, and I'm going to open it in Visual Studio. Okay, so as you can see, we have a classic Xamarin Forms project that has the common project. Then you have the Android and iOS projects without the UWP project. They haven't included it here. Okay, if you go to the starting point, I think you can see here that we are creating a content page like you also do in Xamarin Forms. This part stays the same, but we then add the component, okay, to that page. And this is a Blazor component. Okay, come on. Just waiting for this to load. Okay, so this is the basic example that you see everywhere with the counter. I'm just going to run it and go through it, but then we'll get to create our mobile app. Oh yeah, I have this extension for elevator music. So each time a build is running, I have some elevator music. Because Xamarin Forms builds are very long and I need something to keep me entertained while I wait. If you find it annoying, I'll just disable it. Okay, I'm waiting to start this on my phone. Yeah, we're there. So now we have the basic Blazor sample that you see everywhere with the counter clicker, right? If you already know Blazor syntax or you do Blazor, these things might not be familiar with you because you don't know about content view, stack layout, and so on. Yeah, but if you go to the counter component, then I'm sure you recognize these parts and the way text is binded to the label and so on, how the function is defined here. So this stuff is familiar to you. And this is why they hope it will attract web developers, because you have the Blazor programming model. You know, it's not something new that you have to learn. It's just a new syntax for markup. But you'll also see that it's not that different because you can use CSS and they're really similar in the end. But now that we have this, I'm going to close this project and open another one which has the EWP project. I'm going to use this one because it's faster to deploy on my local machine than on my Android. But you'll see how I'll work with both of them to show that the same piece of code will work on Android and Windows. Unfortunately, I don't have a Mac anymore, so I can't show you the iOS project. Okay, so this is the same project as before, but we also have the Universal Windows Platform project. There are a few steps required to add a Windows project to Xamarin Forms. I don't want to waste your time with it, so this is the same thing that you saw before on my Android device. Okay, now let's start creating the app. Okay, first I'm going to create the XAML part. Okay, come on, Visual Studio. Okay, so I'm going to create a folder for my pages. Okay, I'm going to create a content page called XAML home page. Okay, now that this is created, we can add some code in here, and I'm just going to remove this thing. So if I want to create something basic like a switch, you know, and some and the text for the light, this is what you would normally do. You would create a list view. Okay, let's give it a name. And then you'd have to create a item template for binding. It's really verbose, and this is one of the things that I hate about XAML. Okay. So now we need a container, a horizontal container that will just have a label and a switch. Okay, let's also add some lights in here. I think we just need to create a class. And this class would have two properties. One. and a boolean that says if it's on or off. Okay, once I have this, let's add them to our UI. Okay, and now we also have to do the bindings. So this one should bind to the name property, and the toggle property should bind to the is on property. You see that we have no IntelliSense here because it doesn't know to which object it should bind. Oh yeah, forgot to do something. So now we are starting the Blazor component. We have to start the exam on homepage. Okay, and we see that we have two lights here. So this is the amount of code that you have to write in Xamarin Forms for that simple list. Okay, but what if you want to do that in Blazor? Is it easier? Let's see. We'll create a component for the page here. Let's call it Blazor homepage, and it will be a Razor component. We don't need this code. If I try to build this part, let me switch back to Blazor. Okay, so if I try to run this, we'll see an exception. Because mobile Blazor bindings doesn't know about web components like the header one here, H3. Instead, we have label, for example. Okay, but we're not going to create this. Okay, so we have to create a list, but let's talk a bit about the code behind of the component. Okay, we could put it here, but I think for a few months, Blazor supports partial classes. Okay, so what we can do is create another class. Blazor homepage.razor.cs. Okay, and we have to make this partial and inherit the component base. Okay, and now we have it here. So if I double click this, it will take me to the markup part, and here I have the code behind. Now let's create the same thing as we did before. If I want to just copy paste this code, it won't work. Okay, because this is not how you create a list in Blazor. So let's see how we do that. We would need, of course, a list of lights. Okay, and we would need to go through them. You see that we have IntelliSense here, and let's take only this part, put it here. Okay, and instead of bindings, I can say light.name. And you see that we have IntelliSense here. Also, this is not valid in Blazor. We have to reference this layout options, and it's actually, it's not this one, it's stack orientation, not horizontal. Okay, let's see if this works. Actually, it won't because we haven't added any lights. So let's do that first. We'll just copy it from here. Let's put this on pause and build it. Okay, if you don't believe me that this is the Blazor part, let me add a label here. Okay, let's do something like this. Okay, so I added this text only in the Blazor side. Come on, where are you? Okay, so there it is. Now, if you want to compare this with the XAML part, I think that we can all agree that this is much less verbose than its XAML counterpart, okay? Just look at how much code we have to write in here for a simple binding of the elements. Okay, so this is one of the main reasons that I like Blazor. Another one would be the fact that we can use CSS. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward this a bit, and I'm going to open another project that's essentially the same functionality. I'm going to go over it, but we're going to see components and styles in here. Okay, so let's go over XAML styles versus Blazor styles. Okay, if you want to reuse styles in Xamarin Forms, let me collapse this. You have to do something like this. First, you have to add a resource dictionary to your page. Okay, and this will reference to this XAML file from here, from styles, to XAML styles. Yeah, it's taking a bit to load. Probably I should uninstall the sharper. Okay, so these are some styles that I did for XAML. This is a style for switches, for example, where I set the thumb color or its vertical alignment. This is a style for a button, which is actually a round circle. Now, because I set here the corner radius, the height and the width and so on. This is the style for the name of the light. We have the name, font size and everything. Okay, and here's how you apply these styles in XAML. This should be like this. Okay. So we are going again into our list of lights. This time I used data binding. So instead of setting it in code behind, I actually bind it to a list of lights. Okay, and for each component, I just set its style using a static resource and then the name of the style. But if you want to do the same in Blazor, we can use a CSS file. And I think that you're more familiar with it, especially if you're coming from a web background. And here's how I do it in the Blazor file. You see that it's a lot smaller than the entire XAML file here. Okay, and you just set the class as you do in HTML. Just say the name of the class, and then just write your CSS file with the same properties as I did before. I think this is, again, less verbose than the XAML side, and I really prefer this this approach. Let me run this project and show you what I also have here. Okay, this time the project is connected to my house with this project. Okay, so I'm using Home Assistant and I just get the list of lights. This is a small library that I made, and I can change the color of the lights, toggle them on or off, and so on. So for example, I can turn off the obvious light in here, but actually it didn't. Of course, it's a demo. It seems it doesn't want to function. We'll just try it again and hope it works. No, probably I messed something up when I worked on this last time. Let's run it on my Android device and see how this looks in there. And then I'll go over the UI and tell you what I did. Just waiting for the app to start. Okay, so this is the mobile app. I don't think it will work right now. Of course not. I have no idea why. I think I'll just debug it a bit to see what happens. Because the next part is also important and I need this to be functional. Okay, let's just debug this. Oh, okay, so this part is functional. I think I messed up something in the binding here of the toggle button. So as I said, I also wanted to have this part, sorry, where I can see the if the light is on and what color it has in here. And I would also like to change its color. So the easiest way to do this is to just have some sliders for green, red, and blue. And for example, if I want to change this to red, okay, takes some time. Okay, and if I want to go to blue, hit on save, and this is how it works. I don't think I'm going to waste time with debugging the toggle. The thing is, there are some issues in UWP with switches, because when you try to set the binding and the Boolean property is true, it will actually call the setter again. And in this case, if my light was on, it will call the setter again, it will toggle the light and it will turn it off. I tried to do some workarounds there, but since I failed, and I also screwed up the Android demo with this, but at least I have the color part functional. So here is what I did. I'll start with the XAML part. As I said, here we have the styles, okay? And in order to bind to the code behind, this one, to the XAML homepage.cs, okay, we just have to add the binding context and reference the page itself. Okay, the page has the name root. Then we'll show how many lights we have. And this is how you do it in Xamarin compared to how you do it in Blazor. Okay, it's a lot easier. Then we'll have to show a list of lights. You already saw this part earlier with the list with binding and all. Okay, and now we have a button in the left part, and it's this one over here. Okay, which when it's clicked, it should call a function called change color. It should also bind to the color of the light. Okay, and this ones you already knew before. It's the label and the switch that we saw in the first demo. And if you go here in the code behind, it's a lot of code. Change color, it will just take the button for the light that I pressed on and set this property selected light. Okay, and if you did Xamarin Forms, you know about the notify property change and how much you have to complicate with this. Okay, I also had to create another class that had the notify property change notifications. Now, the next part is the component, the color picker. It's those three sliders for the red, green, and blue. Let me just change the color because my face was all blue. Okay. So here we bind the selected light to this dependency property, and we show it if this property is true or false. Okay. And if you do Xamarin Forms, you know about bindable properties and how ugly they are. Like, this is the code that you have to write for a property for that component. Okay, and if you compare this to the Blazor part, let's go to the color picker in Razor. This is the parameter selected light. Okay, this is very simple. It's not this entire ceremony of declaring the class that declared this, the return type, and so on. Okay, just name your light, you put the parameter attribute there, and that's all. Okay, now I'll go in the Blazor code. And yeah, here we show the list of lights. This is how I added the CSS style. Back in Preview 2, there was a bug, and you couldn't put CSS files in only in the root. You could put them not in folders like I did here. Okay, but now you can put them everywhere. And okay, so we have the number of lights here. Then we iterate through the lights and create the UI that we saw in the app. So we're using CSS classes. Okay, this is what, when you click on the colored button, you would go to the same function here. And we also set a Boolean property to determine if the picker is visible or not. And this is how you do it here. It's just plain Blazor syntax that we're all accustomed with. But another thing that I want to show you is this one. So the button should have the color defined in here. And we bind the background color to the color of the light. This is just an extension method that converts from a class that I made, light color, to color from Xamarin Forms. Okay, so this is all that you have to do to show your color in here. But if you go to the XAML code, okay, we see that I have to use a converter. Okay, so converter means that I have to define it in my styles. It means that I have to create a class with a convert and convert back methods. And again, it's more ceremony for something that could be done easier. Okay, let's see if there's something else that, so we went to the color picker, okay. And now I'm also calling state has changed to update the colors, to update the state of the sliders. And this is updating the value of the color in real time. Okay, I think let me just check if I have something else to show in here. No, I don't think so. I just want to do a recap. So if you compare XAML with Blazor, I think that the main attraction is that you have less code to write, less conventions. Okay, it's a lot easier to use Blazor to do that. If you come from a XAML background, especially if you're a Xamarin Forms developer, it's a lot easier to understand this. Okay, because you already know what the stack layout it is. You already know how it behaves, what you can do with it, what properties it has. Some elements might be familiar for web developers as well. And it's easy to understand what a label does, and switch and so on. But if you come from a web background, you have to learn the new syntax for this markup, and you already know Blazor and the Blazor programming model, so that's okay for you. But if you come from Xamarin Forms, you already know the syntax, and you just take advantage of the new way of using the styles and creating the interface, because I honestly prefer this than creating that list view that I did in XAML. Okay, now look at this code. And this is just something basic. You have no idea how complicated this gets when you create more complicated stuff. I know that some of you might say that, okay, but you can create styles in XAML and so on. Okay, sure, I can create styles, but look how much work it is to just define the style in here and add the style in your page. And then if I go in the style, just isn't it a lot easier to just create the name of the class and like you do it in here? You just set your properties, but no, in XAML you have to define which is the property, which is the value, and so on. So things get a lot more complicated, and probably that's why a lot of people avoid XAML. Honestly, I like it, probably because I started working with it from the start, and I find that it's better than CSS in some ways. For example, if I if I set a grid or something like that, if I set the horizontal options to center, then I know that it will be centered. In CSS, you have to do things like text align center on a div, or margin 0 out or something like that, which it's not really understandable for me. Like, why don't you have a horizontal options and that's all? We have vertical align, but not a horizontal one, and so on. So I think that the properties in XAML are better than the CSS ones, but that's a small sacrifice to pay if you want to use Blazor. Okay, let me just go to Slido and see if we have any questions. So if you have questions, you can unmute yourself, or you can go on Slido and use this code. Later today, I'll put the entire code on GitHub on this link, bit.ly/mobileblazor. Okay, and let's see what questions we have here. Okay, so there's one question: can they inject dependency? Yeah, of course it can be used. I haven't done that because I wanted to keep things simple, but if you go here in the app.cs, so this is how you would add a simple dependency. And then you can use it the same as you would do from Blazor. So nothing is changed in here. Okay, this is an interesting one. So if you have an entire app written in WPF or WinForms, can you just copy the entire XAML code and convert the Windows application into a mobile app? Definitely not with copy and paste, okay, but I'm sure you weren't thinking at that. But as you see here, for example, if I want to, when I created the Blazor page, let me just find the file. Come on, where are you? Okay, so I just took this part and pasted in the Blazor here. And most of it just worked. Because this is using the Xamarin Forms syntax, most of the properties and the elements, yes, they will work, but don't forget that this is Xamarin Forms XAML. This is not WPF XAML. And those are different elements. For example, the stack layout, this is in Xamarin Forms, but in WPF you have stack panel, and in UWP, again, you have stack panel. Okay, so it's a slight difference. There were other things as well. For example, in WPF, you have a border control. In Xamarin Forms, I think the most similar is the frame or something like that. So even if it's still XAML, this is not the same in every flavor that we have in WPF, in WP, and so on. A few years ago, Microsoft tried to create a XAML standard project. Let me just look it up in here. Okay, and yeah, the last update was a typo fixed 2 years ago. So no, there isn't a XAML standard now that could unify all these platforms. I think that mobile Blazor bindings could be a good step towards this direction. But we'll see. We'll see when Maui gets launched what will happen there. Because if I understood correctly, Maui will allow you to create an app for mobile and Windows and Mac with the same UI code. So it's not just reusing libraries from one platform to another. It's also the UI. There's also platform, but I haven't played with that, so I have no idea what to say about it. Okay, from the learning curve perspective, what do you think it's better, easier to learn, Xamarin or Blazor? From the learning curve perspective, I would say you should go with Blazor. But if you want to use Blazor for mobile apps, keep in mind that this is just an experiment for now. It doesn't mean that it will be released, although from what I see, it has great chances to go in that direction, same as Blazor, and I really hope it gets there. So if you want to create mobile apps, then you should go with Xamarin Forms, more precise. But if you go with Blazor, then you would be able to create web apps, Blazor, and once this gets released, you could create production apps with Blazor as well. You will just need to learn the different markup elements from XAML forms. But from the learning curve perspective, go with Blazor. Because most of the people have a bit of web background, you know. So if you already know a little bit of ASP.NET, then Blazor will be a lot easier for you. Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, let me mark this as answered. Okay, I'm going to put the link again here. And once I will put the code here, I'll also put a link to a feedback form, and you can write in there whatever you want. And I also put the question from Alan and forward it to him. Okay, thank you for joining me.